Hello there, welcome back to another Star Wars What If reaction. Today, we're reacting to What If Sifo-Dyas told the Jedi Council about the Clone Army, created by Pente Patrol Star Wars. Be sure to check them out, the links in the description, and now I cannot wait to see what is coming up for this What If, so let's jump right in. Right, before we start reacting to this What If, I just want to say I'm really excited for it because I don't think I've ever seen a Sifo-Dyas What If. And this is a very, very interesting one, so let's get right into it.
Hello. Our story begins
Hello
on
there.
the moon of Obadiah and the wreckage of a Jedi T6 shuttle. Sifo-Dyas jolted awake. His face was
This looks like a really good live-action portrayal of him.
covered in ash and dirt.
Okay.
His head was rattled, likely a concussion, he thought to himself.
Right, so this is when he's shot down by the Pikes, which were ordered, or well, paid, whatever, by Count Dooku to do it, but I guess he survived the crash.
He moved over to the Chancellor's aide Silman to see if he was alright. Sifo stumbled out of his seat and fell over. As he did, he grabbed a hold of the chair to stop himself from being dropped to the floor.
Okay.
He placed his fingers against Silman.
Dude, where have I seen this guy? Is this the guy that played, God, in the Avatar movie? God.
Silman's throat to see if there was a pulse. His lifeless gaze should have been an indicator, but clearly...
So in this timeline, Silman died and Sifo-Dyas didn't, because in the original Sifo-Dyas died and the Silman survived, and obviously Obi-Wan and Anakin found him on Obadiah, like several years later in the Clone Wars.
a man had transcended life and moved into the Force. Sifo-Dyas was a bit sad, being that Silman had been a good companion during their journey from Coruscant.
Oh man.
The two of them were following two separate missions at the same time, the first of which was Chancellor Valorum's request for the two of them to broker a deal with the Pike Syndicate on Obadiah.
Okay.
There was a Senate committee handling the oversight of a growing conflict in the Coruscant underworld. Sifo had been dispatched quietly by the Chancellor without alerting the committee or the Jedi High Council.
So I feel like Chancellor Valorum wasn't actually that bad of a Chancellor, he just kind of couldn't control the Senate, you know?
He feared that openly negotiating with the Pikes could fuel the flames of this conflict, and Valorum did not want that.
Okay.
The issue at hand was the Pike Syndicate's control over spice production in the galaxy. Sifo-Dyas had plenty of experience dealing with the underworld, and as an experienced Jedi Master, he was directed by Valorum to seal the deal. During their transit to Obadiah, the Jedi Council redirected Master Sifo-Dyas to the planet of Felucia to handle a growing issue between tribes.
Okay.
It was another conflict, and Master Sifo-Dyas was one capable of handling it in their eyes, hence their decision to send him there. Due to him being on a secret mission for the Chancellor, he had to follow the direction of the High Council.
Alright.
What he didn't know was what awaited him upon his arrival to Obadiah's system, since they were already in hyperspace when they received the orders to go to Felucia. His good friend, Master Dooku, had aligned himself with the Sith Lord, Sidious, and paid off the Pike Syndicate to have Sifo-Dyas murdered.
Wow.
The Sith had become aware of Master Dyas's Clone Army initiative, which he had already contacted the Kaminoans about, and Sidious was clearly aware of this mission to Obadiah, which he had informed Dooku of. This all taking place about a year before the Trade Federation made a move against the people of Naboo.
So this is 32 BBY.
Sifo didn't remember who shot him down or what had happened, but he quickly got out of the T6 shuttle, grabbing his lightsaber and an oxygen mask.
Okay.
The Pikes had to have been responsible for this. When he exited the shuttle, he could see ships landing around him, so he ran and took cover. There was some sort of consistent sandstorm on the planet, but Sifo saw the Pikes because of their lights, coming through the storm. He hid behind the crash vessel and waited for a clear sign to make a move. The Pikes would land, investigate the interior of the wreckage, and while they were doing that, Sifo would hightail it into one of their ships, taking cover in a storage bay, knowing that they wouldn't find him. They became aware that there was no Jedi inside the shuttle, and therefore, after finding no signs of Sifo's dead body, they contacted Dooku inside the same ship that he was in. Sifo-Dyas only heard the name Tyrannus, but when he heard the voice of his best friend, he was heartbroken.
So he hears it's Dooku, so he now knows that Dooku has turned to the dark side.
Both he and Dooku were born the same year, 102 BBY, and they'd been friends for over 70 years.
That's good to know that Sifo-Dyas, whatever, is as old as Dooku.
And this is how he treated him? It wasn't fair or right. Sifo continued to hide as he hid his emotions beneath his skin. The Pike vessel shot off into the sky and returned to Obadiah.
So, how the hell is Sifo-Dyas gonna get out of here?
Individuals inside the ship spoke about their mission. It was good for the Jedi Master to be here, because he heard everything he needed to hear. Tyrannus informed them to continue searching. He was in transit to Obadiah on behalf of the Chancellor. The Pikes weren't sure how that meeting would have gone, but they returned to their home world to track the skies for any other signs of Jedi starships. When they weren't on the hologram with Tyrannus, they spoke amongst themselves. They needed assurance in the case that Tyrannus betrayed them. Not just anyone would try and get a Jedi Master killed, and they knew how deadly someone like Dooku could be if he wanted a Jedi killed.
Yeah.
This made Sifo very confused. He didn't understand why any of this was happening. The body of Silman was transported back to Obadiah with them, where they would cremate his remains so that his identification could not be traced back to them.
Wow.
Luckily for the Pikes, the Jedi T6 shuttle identification 775519 was not traceable, so once Sifo's communication went offline, no one knew where he could be.
Great.
Of course, the Jedi wouldn't start being concerned for Sifo-Dyas until a couple days after no contact. At the current moment, though, Sifo was completely unaware that he crushed his communication device in the crash. When the Pikes landed and exited their ship on the surface of their home world, Sifo had two options. He could try and broker his own deal on behalf of the Chancellor and try and survive that way, or he could try and make a return to Coruscant to inform the Jedi of what he had heard and what had happened. Something became readily apparent to him, though. In his decision to alter the future by preparing a military force, he had just supplied Tyrannus and that individual's master with a fully armed military.
Nice.
Who knew what else they would do with the power that they had at their disposal? Rampant thoughts ran through his mind as he considered the possibilities of what he had just started.
Okay.
While Sifo was a firm believer in the vision he saw regarding the coming war, he was unsure if the pseudonym, Tyrannus,
it was correct.
was an indicator that the Sith had returned. Sifo feared for the worst, because a galactic total war wouldn't just arise from a spice war in the underworld of Coruscant. He didn't even believe Valorum, despite his corruption, was capable of causing
Valorum is corrupt.
this galactic divide. Sifo foresaw war, and he was the causation of it. He was supposed to die, and Dooku would take his place on Kamino. Why his best friend wanted him dead was beyond him, but he needed to figure out why. The Jedi Council needed to be addressed. Sifo, once the vessel was empty, made sure he could take off, and he was all clear. The fuel line wasn't connected, and there were no hyperspace locks on the landing gears. So he grabbed the control throttle and made a push for space.
So the ship works.
Lifting off of the landing platforms and fleeing from the system. But the Pikes had their weapons at the ready, because they were expecting another Jedi shuttle. And so as he tried to narrowly avoid blasts from the Pike turbo lasers, he was clipped, and the damage hit the hyperdrive, meaning that he had a very limited range to get out to. Nothing in criminal space would be safe for him. Despite the Pikes clearly trying to get ahead of the other crime families with the incentives that Tyrannus was able to provide, it was clear that they would hunt him down and use rivals to do it too. So he could not go to criminal territory. Sifo needed a location that was neutral enough where he could be found after establishing a long-range communication array, which wouldn't be from this current vessel. He then scrolled past Felucia on the scanners, and without a second of hesitation, he flipped
Felucia's a shithole.
back and jammed the hyperdrive forward, launching the ship through hyperspace and away from the trailing Pike starfighters. When he arrived on Felucia, he realized that he didn't even have the fuel necessary to get anywhere else. He chose the perfect system to go to and to hide at. But now he was permanently stuck until the High Council found it within themselves to be worried for him, which could take anywhere from a few days to a couple weeks. This wasn't a lack of care. It was simply the fact that quieting down these tribes could take that long. Felucia was a hard system to contact anyways. Sifo-Dyas decided that he would complete his mission on behalf of the High Council and try and use the tribes to get into contact with Coruscant. The only thing is, he didn't really know where the warring tribes were, and he certainly didn't know who had the long-range communication that got to Coruscant to alert the Council to begin with. All he knew is that he was sent a briefing by the Council that he didn't get a chance to read due to being shot down.
Oh, nice.
Damn him for not thinking about it after the crash. He laughed to himself after thinking that, but seriously, he needed to get a move on. Felucia was one of the most deadly planets in the entire galaxy. It was equipped with vile plant life, and deadly creatures that would cut him down without a second of hesitation. Sifo rushed into the forest with only his lightsaber and whatever else he could find inside the Pike starship. As he ran across the forest of Felucia, he could see the sun start to sink over the horizon. He didn't like his odds of surviving his first night out here in the open, and he wasn't even sure which plants or trees weren't poisonous and were.
Oh, great.
Literally all the information he needed was inside the debriefing he didn't read. He and Silman got wrapped in a completely different conversation, which is why he never got a chance to get acclimated to whatever he needed to prepare for when they arrived at this system. Sifo-Dyas continued walking through the forest, with his senses as attuned as they could be. There was something that crossed his mind. The ambience of the forest was really breathtaking.
Okay.
He felt surrounded by life, and he breathed it all in. This was something he would never find on Coruscant. However, it was also something that made him consider what put him into this predicament. Sure, there were questions about why Dooku would betray him, and how that absolutely destroyed his heart. But there was more. Sifo-Dyas was a good man, he knew that. But he was a highly flawed individual as well. His decision to react to a vision had put the entire galaxy at jeopardy.
I guess,
and
yeah.
while he didn't think he'd be stuck on Felucia for 10 years, the mere fact that no one knew about Kamino or the Clone Army was concerning.
Yeah.
Somehow Tyrannus and Sidious did, but the Jedi Council and the Senate Commission that he said requested the army didn't know. It made him fear if Tyrannus knew about his inhibitor chip idea. Sifo suggested a chip requirement for every clone to have, in cases of rogue Jedi. That chip would be enhanced to make every clone within the Grand Army
Why the fuck would Sifo-Dyas request that?
believe that every Jedi was rogue, or worse. Who knew what these individuals could do with that information? There are so many different possibilities that could come from this, and they didn't even include who the genetic host of such an army would be. Sifo-Dyas was simply commissioning the army. He hadn't gotten around to all the details, but this still alluded to the greater problem sitting in his head. He was a very flawed man. What he did in regard to the clone army was of concern, but it wasn't the only troubling thing he had done as a Jedi. Sifo-Dyas had several stern talkings from the High Council, because he liked to not follow procedure. That very procedure was in place for a reason, and what he had done with several Jedi recruits was avoid necessary protocols. And one of several examples, he went to an orphanage and plucked a young individual away from the orphanage so that they could become a Jedi. By doing this, he refused to see and understand the situation, forcing a friend to abandon another friend, and creating a young girl who resented the Jedi. Someone
nice.
who within the next year would assassinate a Jedi, something that never needed to happen. Sifo-Dyas' refusal to comprehend a situation led to his selection of inviable Jedi candidates, many of which never even completing their youngling trials. He was disrupting miniature ecosystems of people that relied on one another because he wanted to swell the ranks of the Jedi Order. And he had done the same thing with the Clone Army. Now that he was alone with his thoughts and without any sort of distraction to pull his short attention span away from his flaws, he was forced to face them. He considered his actions and remembered all the lessons given to him by Grandmaster Yoda. Sifo continuously remembered Yoda's advice to let go of everything he feared to lose. This wasn't neglecting how Sifo felt about things. It was affirming that one can't go around and change the lives of others without disrupting more than they wished to originally change.
Okay.
Yoda's advice didn't come from a place of complacency. Was he complacent? Yeah, absolutely. But Yoda's advice was decades and centuries worth of experience. He had visions that spanned a decade and reacted. Then he learned. He imparted this information to his peers, students, and his order because he cared. It was Sifo's misstep by not listening to them. As he continued to walk through the forest, he stopped to drink from a canister of water he had with him from the Pike vessel. Once the water settled, he felt shame, and instead of continuing his journey, he got onto his knees and closed his eyes. He allowed the force to surround him. All of his heartbreak from Dooku's betrayal, all of his worry from what he may have started, and his great embarrassment in futile attempts to rectify something that wasn't anything but a vision, sat with and around him. The force enveloped Sifo-Dyas, and he felt at home with it. His back stiffened, and he breathed from his stomach, releasing tension in his shoulders and finding a sense of comfort in the greater force. He spoke outwardly for the first time since he began his walk. He called out to his peers from the High Council. asking them to hear him.
Wow, okay.
Sifo knew it may have not been worth it, but he was desperate.
So he's trying to contact them through the Force.
He couldn't let Dooku destroy the galaxy, or whoever he was working for divide the galaxy into chaos. He had been duped by someone, and it would not come to fruition. As Sifo reached out across the galaxy through his connection in the Force, he could feel someone acknowledge it. Inside the temple, Master Plo Koon responded back,
Ooh.
after being awoken from his sleep. But Plo wasn't the only one who heard this open call. One of the Sith Lords was alerted to this.
Dooku.
And it was the most deadly opponent that could ever find Sifo-Dyas.
Sidious?
He rose from his own slumber
Oh fuck, Plagueis. Oh shit, I completely forgot he's still alive.
and departed for where he felt this call from. At the same time, Master
Shit, Plagueis coming for Sifo-Dyas.
Plo requested Master Balaba to accompany him, which she did. On Felucia, Sifo's
So Plo and Belab are going to Felucia, but Plagueis is also going there. Fuck me.
eyes jolted open when he heard the buzzing and humming of a large creature. Its huge paws could be heard creeping closer and closer.
Oh, fun.
But what sent chills down his spine were the bellows. They rolled through the air, communicating to the life around that the apex predator was here to claim its meal. The air of the forest fell silent, so the vibrancy of the low-frequency sound could bounce between the trees and plants. Sifo got to his feet and closed his eyes, sensing the forest around him. He may have not been the biggest creature inside the forest,
Okay.
but he was the next thing to be feasted on. He backpedaled away from the sound, or at least where he thought it was coming from, and kept his heart steady. The animal continued to move around him, as he started for a more dense location within the jungle. He felt his body react to sounds. The closer he got to the dense jungle, the more fearful he became, so he ignited his lightsaber, and all he saw were dozens of tiny little insects, all of them crawling down from branches of trees
Ugh, insects.
and plants to make a meal out of him.
Oh,
The thumping
oh,
from
fun.
the large carnivorous creature continued to pace around, bellowing. It may have not been a roar, but the noise could be felt in every bone. Sifo's saber caught a glimpse of the eye of the creature, and so he turned and ran further into the trees and the forest until he found a cave and kept himself awake until morning. When the sun rose, he continued his expedition. At the same time, the 3 people he had communicated with landed on the planet. 2 were counselors,
Great.
and 1 was banker Hego Damask. But he
Yeah, definitely not Darth Plagueis.
was here as Plagueis,
Yeah,
because he understood the importance of making sure Sifo-Dyas didn't speak. After all, who else would be the one to keep the Sith informed about the clone army, other than the man who suggested that Sifo listen to his visions? Regardless, the Jedi Master continued to tread through the forest. His eyes were heavy, and his mind was a total mess. But he eventually crossed a natural bridge into a peaceful village.
Okay.
These weren't even the people he was supposed to find, but the villagers welcomed him in,
Oh.
and got him some fresh water, food, and a place to sleep due to his exhaustion. During his time of sleep at the neighboring warlike villages, Plo and Depa searched rigorously for Sifo-Dyas. They knew he was out here somewhere, he had to be.
Yeah.
He called out through the forest so that he could be found and get his reinforcements. They were just hopeful that they weren't too late. Because Sifo seemed like he was in a state of desperation. Plagueis, on the other hand, was walking through the forests, believing that any Jedi calling out for help, like Sifo-Dyas, was probably stranded. He, like Sidious,
Oh, so bro's just casually walking through the jungle.
didn't get the opportunity to enjoy being a Sith all that often, so he came here with the intention to finish Tyrannus' job.
Oh, wow.
Plagueis quite liked the arrangement that was breaking the rule of 2. They had Sidious, Tyrannus, Maul, and himself. It was a big Sith movement, 4 total Sith working together to take the galaxy for themselves. It would be the reckoning of the Jedi, and it would start with Sifo-Dyas' death. When Sifo-Dyas woke up, he would be confused. Another vision presented itself. He looked at the farmers around him and asked if they had seen a Mun man walking around these parts. None of them even knew what a Mun was, so they rejected his question.
Okay.
He was confused. In his sleep, he had seen Hego Damask on this planet with a red lightsaber.
Oh.
Anyways, Sifo was hopeful that someone had heard his call into the forest and requested information about a specific camp or tribe on the planet. The farmers gave him the route he needed and even a speeder,
Alright, these are the fucking guys from Felucia. I remember these.
believing that if there was war, it would negatively impact everyone on the surface of the planet. The farmers didn't want trouble, so they were hopeful and even grateful for the presence of the Jedi Master. Sifo-Dyas would take off in a completely different direction, and even past the individual he had seen in the vision, but he didn't see Plagueis. Pego would trail Master Diaz, who went to the other camp.
Oh.
Sifo was incredibly thankful to see Masters Plo and Balaba. When they asked why he seemed
Oh,
so
nice. But Plagueis is gonna...
distraught, he told them everything, explaining everything from the original vision to the one he had just awoken from. He told them of Valorum's mission and Tyrannus being Dooku. He expressed that they needed to relay this information back to the High Council immediately,
Yeah.
and Master Plo did so, by using the communication device on the long-range scanner inside the T6 shuttle they brought with them. Deppa and Sifo continued talking, as he expressed great regret for his actions, and how he only wished to make them right. As they were speaking, the sound of a lightsaber igniting
Oh, fuck. Oh, shit. Plagueis.
their attention. Their blue sabers reacted, igniting too. Plo didn't notice, or even hear it. All he felt was a sudden change in the Force. He finished his transmission to the Council, where Yoda requested their immediate return, as Master Windu was dispatched with Ada Gallia to locate Kamino and understand what was meant about this apparent clone army.
Okay.
At the same time, Yoda prepared his own mission to handle Dooku, knowing that a council session wouldn't get the answers they needed.
Yeah.
Master Dooku had just returned from his own mission, as it
Right,
was,
because he's still obviously in the Jedi Order.
so they would send Master Jin down to confront him, and a party of counselors, including himself, would await the result of that discussion.
Okay.
As Adi and Mace left the chambers, Qui-Gon would be brought in, so that they could discuss the next steps of their plans. Outside the T6, Plo walked down into a confrontation between Jedi and Sith.
Oh.
Masters Balaba and Diaz stood side by side, blasting their sabers at a massive creature, one who moved like a demon. Plagueis' movement was incredibly fast. His precision with the blade
Oh my god, like, I feel like Dapper Blabba, Sifo-Dyas, and Plo Koon, I don't think they can beat Plagueis, but they can most definitely survive, I think.
unlike anything aside from the likes of Yoda. Plo darted down the ramp and helped his allies, but Plagueis used the Force to rip the ramp off the T6 shuttle, launching Plo with it, knowing that he didn't have the time to try and break Plo's Force barrier. The Sith Lord ripped back down, lobbing Sifo into the ground with a powerful strike, as Deppa covered his back, using all of Windu's training to save his life.
Okay.
The Jedi rallied together as they began a fighting retreat, not knowing if this individual was the recruiter of Dooku or not. Deppa and Sifo were both very talented duelists, but there was a specific reason for Sidious's hesitation to kill his master. He was a monster.
Yeah.
The duelists backpedaled across the grounds of the poisonous planet, defending themselves from strikes made by Plagueis. He didn't stop. He only pressed further, trying to isolate his two human opponents,
Fucking
so
hell.
the Kel door could be extinguished alone. Deppa leapt over a strike before being launched through the air, giving up her defensible position on the ground. Sifo-Dyas reverse gripped his saber and defended himself, as Plagueis dragged a tree down, jabbing at Sifo.
Oh.
The Jedi Master demanded to know who he was, and Plagueis refused to answer. He was focused on only one result. There could be no revelations, only the simplicity of securing himself the power he needed to win this ancient feud. Sifo avoided a strike
Where's
and turned
Plo,
back
man?
to see a Sarlacc master in the forest. Its arms lay dormant, so he stepped around them. Plo rushed to the forest,
Oh, nice.
gathering Deppa as they closed in on Sifo-Dyas. On Coruscant, Qui-Gon Jinn was talking to Dooku, asking if there were any secrets he would like to disclose.
Ooh.
Master Jin was very hurt to know that Dooku had tried to kill his friend, and that the Jedi Council believed that Dooku had joined the Sith, according to Plo's report. If Sifo-Dyas had given that same report, they'd be less inclined to believe it. Qui-Gon didn't ask the question so bluntly, but he beat around the bush.
Okay.
Dooku was hopeful that his former Padawan would join him.
No.
They could betray the Jedi and the Sith, rise above the power they were to establish, and make things the way they wanted them to be. He and Qui-Gon could rebuild a democracy that cared for the people, without the institutions of corruption, greed, or the Jedi oligarchy in the way. Jin couldn't believe it. The Council was right about his master. He had changed. The madness that was always so present within Dooku was as visible as it had ever been. He wanted his apprentice to join the Sith, so that they could establish this new order, and Qui-Gon told Dooku that this wasn't him. Trying to kill Sifo-Dyas and betraying the Jedi Order was too far. It was in this moment that he realized that the Pikes and or the Sith had betrayed him. Dooku told Qui-Gon to not tell a soul, but Master Jin stood up and backed out of the door, revealing a council that had been listening. Yoda, surrounded by Ki-Adi-Mundi, Oppo Rancisis, Yariel Poof,
Ooh.
and Eth Koth. Yaddle had informed the Battle Master, and the Temple Guard unit was on the ready. Oppo told Dooku, in the name of the Galactic Senate of the Republic, he was under arrest.
Ooh.
Pain filled Tyrannus' eyes as he watched Qui-Gon realize the monster he had become. His saber ignited as he told the Jedi that their stench had destroyed the
Really, Dooku? I mean, come on. You're not...
Republic, and it was time for the galaxy to see who they truly were. Yoda leapt in, defending his peers as their sabers all ignited to stop this treacherous Jedi Master. Back inside the forests of Felucia, Sifo-Dyas dipped to strike and fell backwards, planting his hand on the other side of an arm of the Sarlacc.
Okay.
As Plo and Depa realized the same thing Sifo had seen upon his arrival
Oh,
to
there's a Sarlacc pit? Oh, fuck.
the location. They used the Force, lobbing Plagueis over the Jedi Master as he regained his footing and turned around, to see Plagueis roll across the ground, awakening the Sarlacc, its arms flung to life,
Great.
one of which grabbing a hold of the Sith Lord.
Oh.
The other Jedi got to work, moving away from the flailing arms and trying to strike at the dangling Sith Lord. Their blades connected as he tried to defend
Shoot him with Electric Judgment Blow.
himself from the various attempts at his life. He was furious, slashing the arm of the Sarlacc which released him. However, the animal was able to grip him even harder with another arm, as the Jedi continued to attack him. From the forest line, where they entered, the townspeople of the local tribe fired into the air, forcing him to defend himself from various directions.
Okay.
Plagueis tried with his entire heart to force them to stop, but he was clipped, cut, and eventually disarmed. He would choke out some of the local tribal fighters with the Force, but his life would
Well.
be consumed by the Sarlacc,
Yeah.
as the dying Sith was mortally wounded by one of the 3 Jedi. Which one, none of the 4 were sure. Inside of the Jedi Temple, Yoda bounced out of the room, as Eth and Kiadi blocked the entrance that Dooku walked out of. Yoda, Yariel, and Oppo, the 3 oldest serving counselors, worked together. Their weapons moved steadily and precisely,
Dooku, you're done for, bro.
as they each struck at Dooku, who masterfully avoided their strikes. On opposite ends of the hallways, temple guards activated their pikes, and cut off the wannabe Sith. Tyrannus was furious, using all of
PPSW roasted him, a wannabe Sith.
his anger, but it left him weak in combat against his former master. Yoda had trained him well, but Dooku still had much to learn. Their weapons collided, lighting up the corridor in blue and green. As Dooku tried to overpower his master, Oppo's tail whipped the back of his leg, before gripping his wrist and breaking it.
Oh, wow.
The power move completely disarmed Dooku as he fell backwards in pain, and Yariel moved in to sedate him. Tyrannus tried to stop him with all of his strength, but it didn't work. He instead fell unconscious in the middle of the floor. Qui-Gon looked down shamefully, and turned to Mundi, expressing that all he got was the name Sidious. He had no clue who that was, but there was still a Sith waiting somewhere.
So they know about... He only said cities, but they know about Plagueis. Plagueis just has died now, anyway, and then there's Maul.
Galaxy for them. While Sifo-Dyas, Plo Koon, and Depa Billaba prepared to return home, after quickly fixing up the tribal situation on Felucia, Mace Windu and Adi Gallia arrived at Kamino. They were greeted by Kaminoans, who inquired if the Senate Committee or Sifo-Dyas had sent them.
Okay.
The Jedi nodded their heads. However, they were also here for more pressing matters, as was revealed to them through a joint call between the Felucia Party and the counselors from Coruscant. There were 2 names to search for, one of which being Tyrannus, the other one being Sidious.
Oh.
None of them knew who the Mun Sith was, but he was dead. His name was simply a mystery. The Kaminoans, without having started the process of actually building the clone army, nor acquiring the funds, decided that their best option was to side with the Jedi. The Sith hadn't given them anything to work with per se, and their promises were a lot more empty, due to no separatist movement existing, nor a war to continue funding their clone operations, and so forth. The Jedi were their best bet for returning business. However, Mace and Adi wouldn't learn anything more than they already knew, or assumed based off of Sifo-Dyas' input from their joint call.
Okay.
This left the Jedi in a complete bind, as they waited for Dooku to reawaken on Coruscant. Yet, there was more for Sifo-Dyas to address and handle, which included the secret mission he had to Obadiah. He would be accompanied by Depa and Plo, due to their involvement in the case on Felucia. Joining them would be Ki-Adi-Mundi and even Peel, considering Yaddle was waiting for Dooku to wake up on the other side of the city. Inside of Valorum's office, where Palpatine was also situated, Sifo-Dyas revealed the information regarding his
Bro, Palpatine's gonna shit himself.
attempted assassination. He explained that the Jedi Master named Dooku had betrayed him, and there was a thicker plot. Depa and Plo listened intently, while each watched Palpatine and Valorum. Something wasn't adding up. If the Sith had truly returned, as based on Dooku becoming Tyrannus, the name Sidious, and the individual from Felucia, then perhaps the Sith had infiltrated more than they believed. As was covered during their trip from Felucia, Hego Damask was the Sith they killed on the poisonous planet.
Oh.
He wasn't close enough
How did they discover that?
to Valorum to know about the mission to Obadiah, but Damask had fundings that could effectively get the Kaminoans on board. Essentially, Sifo-Dyas believed that there were 3 or 4 Sith that were actively working on this project, not including Dooku. They had already cracked part of the code, but if the Sith had covering for the financial, political, and spiritual sectors of the Republic, then they could masterfully create the downfall of the Jedi Order, or even the Republic itself. Essentially saying, Hego was the financial, and Dooku was the spiritual, which left one more to be the political.
Well, Dooku is also kind of financial, but yeah. And spiritual, what was it? Political is, of course, Sidious Palpatine.
If Sifo-Dyas' theory remained correct. There were no specific hints during the discussion with Valorum, but the Jedi present, specifically Ki-Adi-Mundi, informed the Chancellor that his lack of transparency with the Council almost created a catastrophe. Master Quinlan Vos was working within the underworld to prevent Coruscant from starting a war. He and his fellow Jedi were doing a substantial job at their mission. While Sifo-Dyas acted out of line, that was an internal matter for the Council to handle. They would appreciate more cooperation going forward from the Chancellor's office, especially in relation to underworld matters. The Order operated within the realm frequently, so that they could help others, and Valorum needed to see that. Inside the temple, Master Dooku refused to give up Palpatine's information, but there were some things that could connect the dots for them. The Council would be informing Valorum of who murdered Silman, but for the current session, they just left, they explained that they would work arduously to find the assassin. The Council would eventually inform Valorum of who murdered Silman, but for the time being, they just left, explaining that they would work arduously to find the actual assassin. This led to a makeshift meeting outside of Dooku's cell, where some of the dots could be connected. Sidious clearly wasn't Hego Damask, because something wasn't adding up. Despite the Council's frustration with Sifo-Dyas, as more information was relayed from Kamino, something became more apparent. The Sith had wondrous funding, which meant the true key to all of this was a politician on Damask Holdings' record books. The corporation surely would appoint politicians that Hego supported, and it would be on the record books. This led to Terra Sanube and Saesee Tin breaking into the accounting building for Damask Holdings on Coruscant.
They're probably going to find contacts between that and Palpatine, right?
Take place overnight, while Masters Gallia and Windu continue to break information out of the Kaminoans. Sidious, on the other hand, knew the Jedi were closing in on him, and he began to get worried. He didn't know what Dooku said, and he considered taking his student to Crayus too, so that they could hide until all of this blew over. But even Sidious didn't agree with the idea of hiding. They were Sith. What they should be doing is confronting the Jedi head-on, and forcing them to bow to their will. But because Palpatine was inside of the works, the Jedi that raided Palpatine's apartment wouldn't find him, making his apparent disappearance even more confusing. With no details coming from Dooku regarding who Sidious was, and a few more politicians to investigate, based on individuals funded by Damask Holdings, the Jedi remained active throughout the night. Sidious was left completely unaware of these raids, as he sent his own student on a mission to Korriban. He wanted him to remain there until all of this blew over. He was requested to not leave until he was given specific orders to do so. And the following morning, Windu and Gallia would return from Kamino, as the Jedi moved to investigate one more politician during his day hours. Yoda was accompanied by Mundi, Plo, and Yerion. At the same time, Depa and Eth Koth would go to Valorum's office to explain what they were going to do. Inside the temple at the same time, Sifo and Dooku sat in silence. They were being watched by Yaddle and even Peel. Dyas told his lifelong friend that he had been hurt dearly by his actions. To attempt to kill him was really pretty uncalled for. Sifo's heart hurt, and he expressed to Dooku that these actions would destroy their friendship. Sifo-Dyas tried to get a clear answer from Dooku, but now that the Jedi Council had acted so swiftly, all of his rationale, the disappointment he felt from his former student Qui-Gon, including their conversation, left Dooku pretty bereft. He did this for the benefit of the galaxy, not realizing that those closest to him wouldn't understand. It would be their last conversation ever, and Sifo-Dyas would leave without a true answer or comprehension of his former friend's actions. Windu would have a similarly disappointing conversation. Inside the executive building, Depa and Eth would inform the Chancellor that one of his politicians would be taken into custody, and he needed to support them. Valorum's backbone wasn't strong, and he was willing to comply with the suggestion by the Jedi. If there were a traitor, why would he have an issue with it? It was only the Jedi and the Senate maintaining their great alliance. As it turned out, there was a traitor, and Palpatine would not go quietly. But no one would know that. The Jedi were able to stop him before he could realistically kill them.
Okay.
It was a power team, and with Yoda alone, it would have been challenging, let alone having Plo, Yariel, and Moody there.
Yeah.
But by the
Done.
end, despite some injuries, cities would be claimed by the Jedi. Information on these revelations wouldn't come out for another couple months. By that point, no one really cared because the Trade Federation was attempting to create drama in the Senate. Without the Sith telling them to blockade Naboo, Gunray would attempt a political coup inside the Senate. It actually would work for a couple days, but it wouldn't go the distance necessary to have longevity. It would basically be political self-immolation for the Federation. They wouldn't just face the exact same taxes that forced them to become this hostile, but they would also be broken apart until they went bankrupt as well.
Lol.
Before any of that happened, though, the Jedi would assume that they defeated the Sith. They'd clear Palpatine's
Well, Maul's left on Korriban, or whatever the hell he was sent, but like, come on, Maul, he's not going to do anything.
residents and even find the works, leaving them to assume that they had won the war again, because based on Hego Damask's record books, Palpatine was the only other individual that could be linked to the Sith, which is proven by the fight they had. Without any signs of Maul's mere existence, he would simply exist as a ghost, suffering on the Sith homeworld for decades.
Oh, so he's literally just sitting there for decades. Is he stupid? Right, so he's just gonna die anyway.
He would eventually get tired of waiting for Palpatine and find home on Dathomir, where his mother, Talzin, would welcome him back home.
Oh, okay.
His hate for the Jedi would remain, but it wouldn't ever amount to anything, because he had been betrayed by the Sith, far more than he'd ever been hurt by the Jedi.
Yeah.
The Kaminoans would never create a grand army of the Republic, and so their bet on getting business would fall through. But they did get lucky, because they'd get news coverage due to the scandal, and people who had lots of money would pay for their own clones, of various types, and various purposes. Just nothing.
You know what? Hey, mention it. I can just think of the various purposes and the various types of clones that people would want, for purposes.
Large enough for a clone army. The Jedi Council would have their own punishment for Sifo-Dyas, where he would be sent off-world to meditate in a forced isolation. He would spend a year with Kirek and Phila, learning to let go of his attachments and his visions, and to learn to understand that reacting needed thought, not action. Sifo would return to the Council a changed and better man, seeing the errors of his ways and becoming a fix to the Jedi Order. What Sifo-Dyas held against the Jedi would rapidly dissipate. Due to Dooku's rancid turn to evil, he felt that his gripes with the Order were far less important than he initially believed them to be. This would be something shared by Qui-Gon Jinn. Both Jedi saw that there were flaws, but none grave enough to try and assassinate a best friend. While the Pike Syndicate situation wouldn't result in an underworld war, the Trade Federation's move against the Senate would be so reprehensible that the Jedi were tasked with dismantling the super corporations that ran the Republic.
That's good.
It elicited Valorum more power and more length to his term. It would cause a few hiccups in the market, but overall it would result in a better Republic society. Valorum would pride the Jedi for their work in maintaining the balance of the Republic, and they would be heralded in as heroes once more. But to them, especially Sifo-Dyas, the job was not done yet, and he would be the catalyst of proper change made to the Order. Changes not including a war or a military nor a turn to darkness. Sifo-Dyas' survival and unveiling of the clone army would be the wake-up call that the Order needed. That, along with Valorum's public praise for the Order, would remind the galaxy of the heroes that were the Jedi. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to the Patreon.
I mean, wow, that is a just nice, good ending, beautiful story, honestly. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. It's just great writing and great story overall. We got some great duels, great everything, really, like the usual. So I'm going to give this a story 9 out of 10. I really like it. And it's a, this is my first Sifo-Dyas story I've seen. And wow, it's great. It's great. I really like it. So I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Let me know what you guys would rate this out of 10 in the comment section down below. Whether you guys agree with my 9 out of 10 rating or if you don't, and why.
Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed this reaction, make sure to go subscribe to Pente Patrol Star Wars for more awesome What If content. And do not forget to subscribe to my channel, leave a like, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an upload. Remember, a new Star Wars What If reaction drops every single day. Join our Discord, links in the description, and if you want to support the channel and get exclusive perks, consider joining our Patreon. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video, start by commenting with any feedback, or let me know which What If I should react to next. Anyway, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. This is the way, the Force be with you. Until then, I will see you next time.
Hey, you didn't watch it? Well, check out the video on the left side of the screen, which is specifically recommended for you, or check out the playlist on the right of the screen, which contains similar videos to this one, made by me, of course. Hey, remember, subscribe.